I've been asked to basically give a testimonial of how I came to Christ, but that's a 10-year story, so I'm just going to give you a part of it because it took a very long time. I used to live in High Wycombe in Buckinghamshire, and there was a time in my life when things fell apart. And even then, if someone had said I'd be standing here today telling you how I became a Christian, I'd have said, you don't know me. You're just mad. But things change. And as I said, there was a season of my life when everything fell apart. I had a business I'd run for 21 years. And in the space of 1 year, I went from living a very wealthy, comfortable life to being homeless and penniless. I went from a house with a tennis court and a BMW in the driveway to living from the goodwill of good friends and catching the bus everywhere, or even walking more often than not. I went from a house with 2 kids and a dog to my kids having to go live with my ex-wife, and what was worse, they took my dog with them. Now, I'm not saying this for sympathy, I'm saying it because when life strips you down like that, you really start to, you really start to question what you believe about yourself, about others, and of course, about God. And one Saturday morning during this time, I was living in High Wycombe at the time, I hadn't seen my children for over a month. I hadn't had the money to go and see them, and I was really missing them. And I kind of reached breaking point. I was desperate, well, not dramatic, just desperate. And every time my children phoned me, or I spoke to my children, they would ask me the same question. Dad, when are you coming to see us? So I decided I didn't care what it was going to take. I was going to get there. I was going to go and see them. But of course, that's when reality really hits you. And you realize you got £5 to your name. And I had 3 buses to catch to get to them and back again. And that was going to cost me £15. But I don't know. I just said I was going to make it. My ex-wife said, look, you can stay on your daughter's bedroom floor. It's not a problem, you can stay the night, but there was one problem. I still had to get there, and I had no idea how I was going to do it. But I told my daughter, I said, I don't care what it takes. I'm going to get there. I'm going to come and see you, even if I have to hitchhike the whole way. Now, of course, like all good parents, my daughter then repeated back to me words I'd said to her many, many times. Don't hitchhike, it isn't safe. And then she said, well, if you're going to hitchhike, I don't want you to come. And that... So I promised her I'd get there somehow, and I promised her I wouldn't hitchhike. Whatever it took, I would get there. So I set off with just enough money to get halfway to them, but not all the way. I went to the bus station in High Wycombe, and I had to catch the bus to Oxford, and then another one on from Oxford. And I stood in the queue. The Oxford coach is lovely. It's really nice. It's plush, it's luxurious. It's the one from London to Oxford, stops in High Wycombe. It's always got plenty of room on board, so I just waited for the bus. There was only one person in front of me in the queue, so I had nothing to worry about, really. Except this time, when the bus driver arrived, and he got down from the bus, he said, sorry, I only got room for 1 passenger. So the guy in front of me got on board, and there I was, stood there. I'd failed at my first hurdle. What was I going to do? Was I going to break my promise to my daughter and hitchhike? Or was I going to break my promise to my daughter and maybe not get to see them that day? So I turned to the woman behind me, and I said, do you know if there's another bus to Oxford? I don't know of one. I need to get there to see my children. And then something happened that I will never ever forget. The woman looked at me. I mean, she really looked at me, and she looked at me in a way that was filled with kindness. Such a kindness I hadn't seen for a very long time. And she simply said, "We'll take you." She said, "My husband's got the car just over there." So they didn't know me from Adam. I was just a stranger at a bus stop. They could have pointed me to the information desk. They could have simply shrugged their shoulders and said, "Sorry, I don't know," and walked off. But they didn't. Instead, they offered to drive me 30 miles because I was a father who was desperate. Who was desperate to see his children. And as we drove, they asked me what was going on in my life. They asked me, why I was there and everything. And to be honest, by that stage, I had nothing left to pretend with. There was nothing left. So I told them that my life had fallen apart, that I was staying with friends, and that I was desperate to see my kids that day. Then they said something to me that made me feel extremely uncomfortable at that time. They told me they were Christians, and they asked if they could pray for me. And that made me feel uncomfortable because at that time I was an atheist, and I wasn't just any old atheist. I was the angry, unpleasant kind of atheist. Not the polite, "oh, I'm not sure" type atheist, no. I was the kind who enjoyed mocking Christians. I made a sport of it. I used to ridicule them. I'd love to win arguments based on science and philosophy. I told them faith was just delusional, and I treated believers like intellectual punchlines. But these two people had literally carried me 30 miles when I couldn't get there myself. So I swallowed my pride. I said, "Yeah, of course you can." No problem at all. And they prayed for me as they drove. And then they dropped me in Oxford at the bus stop, and they went on their way, and I've never seen them since. I don't even know their names. So I had the £5 still. I spent that money getting the return ticket to see my children in West Oxfordshire. And because of that couple, I got to see my children that day. Now you may be thinking, wow, they prayed for me, the heavens opened, and I became a believer. No, not quite. But something did change in me that day. Their kindness shifted something in me that was never going to go back. I couldn't keep hating Christianity and Christians quite as much anymore. So I did visit my children, and the next day I was back at the bus stop where they dropped me. Only this time I was broke. I had no money, a few pence to my name, and I still needed £5 to get the bus back to High Wycombe where I was living. So I was standing there thinking to myself, well, what am I going to do? How was I going to walk 30 miles without looking like a man who's lost his mind? Now, as you probably don't know, but the bus station in Oxford, there were loads of bus stops outside the train station. So as I stood there thinking about what I was going to do, a train must have come in because, hundreds and hundreds of people suddenly started streaming out of the train station through the bus stops. And they started pushing me along, and I couldn't stand still any longer. So as they pushed me along, eventually I thought, well, I've got to get out of this crowd. So I stepped backwards into one of those bus shelters just to get out of the crowd. And I thought to myself, what am I going to do? And I looked down at my feet, as I did. And there, sticking out from under my foot, was a £5 note. I picked it up. I looked around, I thought, well, someone's dropped this. Who's dropped it? And in the time it took me to step back into that bus stop, look down at my feet, pick up a £5 note, those hundreds and hundreds of people who'd been milling around had all disappeared. It's like every single person got off that train and not one of them needed to catch a bus. The place was empty. So I couldn't give the money back to anyone. I had no idea who dropped it. So I just thought to myself, well, what am I going to do? I've got the money now, I just need to find the bus stop. And I looked up, and there was a sign, bus stop, High Wycombe. So there I was, a man who couldn't get to see his children, carried by the kindness of strangers, and then on the way home, provided for down to the exact penny I needed to get home at exactly the place I needed it. Now I know what some of you are thinking, saying, well, this couple that gave you a lift, did you tell them that you were an atheist? And I said, well, no, I didn't. I didn't tell them anything. They didn't need to know. And why not? Well, because I was trying to be polite. They were kind to me. I had no reason to be unpolite to them. So why am I telling you the bit that I was an atheist? Why tell you that I was an enemy of Christians and I used to mock them? Well, because that couple didn't know who I was, and that's precisely the point. Their kindness didn't actually come with any conditions. They didn't reserve their kindness for people who were like them. They didn't ask me what I believed. They didn't quiz me. They didn't test me to see if I deserved their kindness. They just stopped and helped a stranger in need. And you really don't get kindness like that. So, I don't know who that couple were. I've never seen them since. But their stopping changed something in me. It changed the course of my life. If it weren't for their kindness and their prayers that day, I wouldn't be standing here today. They had no idea what that small act of kindness would lead to. They had no idea I'd be standing here today telling all of you about their actions. They just stopped. And I'm here today because then God did the rest. That's it.